Hi everyone, good morning and welcome to the first or another discussion in Philippine politics and governance. And in today's video, we're going to talk about functions of executive branch. So, a good thing in this discussion, and I would suggest that we will be, or you should have a copy of the 1987 Constitution and look at section or Article 7, which is the executive department. So mostly the discussion in this video will revolve around each sections of qualifications for president, vice president, and cabinet members. But as you can see in your book, basically, it is focused with the president alone. But you have to remember, if we're going to extend the executive branch, it doesn't just lie in the president itself, but it also gives power to vice president and cabinet members. Throughout this video, we will be removing as well the stereotype of a vice president being the spare tire of the president as we move forward, because I'll be proving to you in this discussion that the vice president has an explicit role in the executive department. So according to the 1987 Constitution, there are a lot of things or a lot of responsibilities that a member of executive branch have. So in this discussion, we will be explaining the roles and powers of Philippine president. We'll be discussing as well how president exercises power. And most importantly, we'll be discussing as well the vice president's role and cabinet members. Now, moving forward, according to Article 7, 1987 Constitution, in Section 1 states that the executive power shall be vested in the President of the Philippines. Remember that the Philippine Constitution has three equal branches, right? Executive, legislative, and judiciary. It's safe to assume that the leader of the executive branch is really indeed the president. So the question to ourselves, especially when it is already the time we are going to elect the next president in our country, it is important and high time for us to know these qualifications and these powers that we are actually investing to the president that we will be electing on May 9, 2022. So in section number 2, it states here that no person may be elected president unless, one, he is a natural born citizen of the Philippines. It states in the section 2 the qualifications of a president. The first qualification is a natural born citizen of the Philippines. So, side discussion, we have two ways of acquiring citizenship. That's hus soli and hus sanguinis. Hus soli means this is what United States is following. You can acquire citizenship through where you were born, like in the soil, for example. Or hus sanguinis is you acquire citizenship by blood. And Philippines follow hus sanguinis principle of acquiring citizenship. And when we say natural born citizen or natural born Filipino, is you were born in the Philippines and at the same time your mother and father are both Filipinos. Okay. Next, a registered voter. It is important as well that you practice the power of suffrage if you want to run for a president or presidential position. Also, you are able to read and write. You need to at least gain the basic literacy, which is being already challenged all throughout the years since 1987, because we have to elevate this particular standards because the literacy is already increasing. The level of literacy in our country is already increasing. So we have also to check. But as of the moment in the 1987 Constitution, the criteria is the president should be able to read and write. The next one, at least 40 years of age on the day of the election and a resident of the Philippines for at least 10 years immediately preceding such election. If you're going to remember the case in 2016 election of Grace Poe, she was challenged her capability and her qualifications in running for the position primarily because she resided in United States for quite some time. That has been a challenge by Senator Chis Escudero way back 2016 election, but it is clear in the 1987 Constitution that 10 years immediately preceding such election, you are allowed to run for that particular office. Kung 10 years consecutive after the election is nandito or prior to the election is nandito ka naman sa Pilipinas, we don't have any problem with that one. So that is section number 2. So in section number 2, it states the qualifications of the president to run. In section number 3, it talks about the vice president. However, this is where misconceptions of lawyers, of political analysts enters, primarily because it states here that there shall be a vice president who shall have the same qualifications and term of office and be elected within the same manner of the president. Meaning to say, the power that the vice president have is actually equal to president who is sitting. They were elected in the same manner. They do have the same functions, just in case of relinquishment happens. He or she may be removed from office as the same in the same manner as the president, and that is through impeachment. All right. Remember, the vice president may be appointed as a member of the cabinet. Such appointment requires no confirmation. Remember that Lenny Robredo, way back in 2017 or 2018, if I'm not mistaken, was given a position in the cabinet. However, she was removed from office for quite some reason or for some sad boy reasons, right? So yeah, vice president can be appointed basically in a cabinet position in the executive branch. Another thing, vice president as well is also or can also have a power to appear in Congress and to be part of legislation. All right, we'll be looking at that one as we move forward in legislative department. Okay, in section number 4, it says here that the president and the vice president shall be elected by direct vote of people for a term of 6 years, which shall begin at noon on the 13th day of June, next following the day of the election, and shall end at noon of the same day 6 years thereafter. In this section, it's discussing the time where a president will have or will stop or will end its term, and the succeeding president, or when the term will be starting. It says here, ladies and gentlemen, very clear, that the term of 6 years, pag sinabi natin 6 years, which shall begin at noon, begin at noon on the 13th day of June. Let's say, for example, that a president won a particular position on May 9, 2022. That person, she will be assuming that particular position on the 30th day of June, meaning June 30 mag-start yung term niya. Okay? Following the day of the election, and shall end, ito naman, at noon, ladies and gentlemen, of 6 years, June 30, 6 years thereafter. Meaning to say, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte's term would end on June 30, 2022, and at the same time, the next president would be relinquishing that particular position on June 30, 2022 as well. It is clear in the 1987 Constitution. The president shall not be eligible for any re-election. Let me just clarify this, that the 1987 Constitution doesn't allow anybody to be re-elected as a president. What's the rationale behind, right? The rationale behind, since we are a democratic country, we don't want monopolization of power, and the term limit of the president is basically 6 years. We should respect that one. In the history, there are only 2 presidents in our country who actually wasn't able or failed to follow what the Constitution is saying. Okay, no person who has succeeded as president and has served as such for more than 4 years shall be qualified for election to the same office at any time. Again, re-elections are not allowed to presidents. Okay, that's what section 4 is telling us, right? In section 5, before they enter on the execution of their office, it is required that the president and the vice president or the acting president shall take the following oath or affirmation. This, what should they solemnly swear? I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully and conscientiously fulfill my duties as President or Vice President of the Philippines, preserve and defend its constitution, execute its laws, do justice to every man, and consecrate myself to the service of the nation. So help me God. This particular oath should be given in front of a judge as well, or in front of a associate justice or member of the Supreme Court. Yeah. So they need to take an oath. Okay. This is I'll skip other sections primarily because they are not nearly important. So I'll jump with I'm not say I mean they're not correlated much more. I don't want to give you much more burden since you're not yet a qualified students. I'm not gonna ask you guys to remember all of those sections. I'll jump to the important sections that you have to remember in this particular discussion. Let's go to section 16. It states here that the president shall nominate and with the consent of the Commission on Appointments, appoint the heads of the executive departments, ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, or officers of the armed forces from the rank of colonel or naval captain, and other officers whose appointments are vested in him in this constitution. Remember in section 16, we're talking about already him being a chief of staff, him being the leader of the executive department. So you can see already the power that constitutes to him as a president. He also needs to appoint all other officers of the government whose appointments are not otherwise provided for by law, and those whom he may be authorized by law to appoint. The Congress may, by law, vest the appointment of other officers lower in rank in the president alone, in the courts or in the heads of department, agencies, commissions, or boards. Remember that a president, to follow check and balances principle, needs to consult and have a consent together with the Commission on Appointments. Okay, he cannot appoint directly a particular head or of an executive branch if he does not have any consent coming from the Commission on Appointments. Also, the Congress has the power, okay, to vest an appointment for low-ranking officers, okay, in the president alone or in the courts, for example, or even other heads of departments. The Congress, for example, lower courts, all right, Hall of Justice, for example, or local government unit offices can be appointed through legislation of the Congress. That's what section 16 is telling us. In section number 17, my dear students, the president, it states here his power to control all the executive departments, bureaus, and offices. Okay, so he is the head of all the department, DOJ, Department of Education, etc. Okay, bureaus and offices. He shall ensure that the laws may be faithfully executed. Let me repeat that: faithfully executed. Remember that we have as well cabinet meetings. All right. So in cabinet meetings, the president is also presiding that particular meeting. You have to put that one in your mind. Okay. Now, next one is what we call section 18. Medyo mahaba-haba siya. The president shall be one, the commander-in-chief, okay, of all armed forces of the Philippines, and whenever it becomes necessary, he may call out such armed forces to prevent or suppress lawless violence, invasion, or rebellion. Papasok po dito yung idea ng martial law. Okay, takot na takot tayo with regards with martial law, but you have to remember that the groundings of martial law in 1973 Constitution, I believe and I hope that you guys saw that particular provision in 1973 Constitution, do have different groundings as well in the 1987 Constitution. But even if they exist on the same, they do have different groundings. Okay, because as the commander-in-chief or a commander-in-chief of armed forces of the Philippines, just in case there's an invasion, there's a lawless violence, there's criminality, there's rebellion, he can call out the armed forces of the Philippines and take over on that party in solving that particular invasion. So ladies and gentlemen, remember this: in case of invasion or rebellion, when the public safety requires, he may, for a period not exceeding 60 days, suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, or place the Philippines or any part thereof under martial law. Okay, that's what section 18 is telling us. Kasi di ba we're asking question, why are we calling out President Duterte way back in 2017 and 2018 imposing martial law in Mindanao more than 60 days? It's because it's unconstitutional already. It's clear coming from the Constitution that if the invasion is not proven, right, or even if it's existing, the armed forces of the Philippines has 2 months to solve that particular problem. Because what is writ of habeas corpus, Sir Pat? Writ of habeas corpus, ladies and gentlemen, is a power of a citizen. Okay? It is a power of a citizen and the power of a state, ladies and gentlemen, that if you're, for example, suspected or proven that you are caught on act of rebellion, pigbabadil mo na kami na militar, under a writ or under suspension of writ of habeas corpus, you can be easily detained, all right, and filed a case without warrant of arrest. That is writ of habeas corpus. Writ of habeas corpus is protecting people from warrantless arrests. Okay, because it is required that we have warrants before we arrest people or before we search, okay, a particular place. We need warrants coming from courts. But in the absence of writ of habeas corpus, we don't need a warrant for you to be arrested because we don't have writ of habeas corpus. Not to remember that. Within 48 hours from the proclamation of martial law or the suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, the President shall submit a report in person or in writing to the Congress. So kailangan pong mag-report, ladies and gentlemen, ni President sa Congress. And the Congress voting jointly by a vote of at least a majority. When we say majority, guys, we have two types of majority. Okay? Meron po tayong tinatawag sa Congress na 2/3 vote. Okay? Meaning 2/3 ng population, or pwede rin po natin siyang tawagin na 50% plus 1. Okay? That is an example of a majority. Again, let me repeat. An example of majority is a 50% plus 1, or 2/3 can be another example of a majority. 2/3 votes. Okay? Majority of all its members in regular or special session. Bakit may special session, Sir Pat? What if yung invasion nangyari on the time na walang session yung Congress? Pwede pong magkaroon ng special session just to push through this particular martial law. Kasi kailangan legislated po pa rin siya. May revoke such proclamation or suspension, which revocation shall not be set aside by the President. Let's say, for example, na-prove ng, kasi di ba, pwede namang as a President, pwede kang mag-declare ng martial law. Ay, gusto kong iano to, nakakainis. Okay, may martial law pa. Hindi siya pwedeng ganon. Okay, that's the difference in 1987 Constitution, because we have the idea of revocation. The Congress shall hear, okay, here before they vote, they need an interpellation if the invasion is really happening on that particular place, and they have to prove it on a joint session so that they can say that the action is legitimate. And once it's legitimate, therefore that's the time that they're going to vote. Okay, so if you will see, there is the presence of checks and balances in that particular discussion. Kasi hindi mo lang basta-basta sasabihin ni President na, oh, martial law tayo. Hindi pwedeng ganun, right? There is a hearing that should be conducted in the Congress. The Congress may, in the same manner, extend. Ayun, ito naman yung sinasabi ni President Duterte. Okay, the Congress may, sinasabi niya, hindi na ako yung nag-extend. It's the Congress already. Because it states in the Constitution as well that the Congress may, in the same manner, extend such proclamation or suspension for a period to be determined by the Congress. Okay? Si President, 60 days lang yung power niya. Finorward niya sa Congress, alright? So si Congress na yung mag-a-assess after 60 days, do we need to extend the martial law? That's the reason why it's still happening in Mindanao right now. The extension is still being forwarded because of the power of the Congress. Okay? If the invasion or rebellions shall persist and public safety requires it, the Congress can extend it and they will determine until when. Okay? See, in this slide, you saw the checks and balances between the legislative and the executive, all right? And also in this slide, you saw the power of the president in declaring martial law. I hope that it's clear for everybody. Hindi po to 1970s, all right? 1987 is protecting us for that history to repeat itself again. Okay, so that's section 18 of the 1987 Constitution. Okay, you can pause on this particular slide. You can check and reread section number 18 because I believe it has a lot of information that you got, right? Now, next, a state of martial law does not suspend the operation of the Constitution. Okay? Ito po kasi yung nangyari. What's the rationale behind this particular? This is still under section 18 by the way. Okay, ito yung nangyari. Bakit nandito yung provision na to? Okay? Because in the history, if we're going to check 1973 Consti, nanggaling po to sa 1935 Constitution. But after declaring martial law, parang in-invalidate si 1935, nagkaroon ng 1973 Constitution. It's cleared in section 18, my dear students, that even if there's an existence of martial law, the 1987 Constitution still stands. Okay? Hindi rin pwedeng isupplant the functioning of the civil courts. Hindi rin pwedeng yung legislative assemblies is i-penetrate. Hindi rin pwedeng i-authorize yung conferment of jurisdiction on military courts and agencies over civilians where civil courts are able to function. Hindi pwedeng ma-dismantle ang Constitution just because there's an existence of martial law. Always remember that. Okay? Even if my martial law, the Constitution should still stand. That is in the 1987 Constitution, Section 18, Article 7. Okay? So, nor automatically suspend the privilege of the writ. Hindi pwedeng, just because may martial law, automatic yung pag-suspend ng writ. Again, there should be a hearing. There should be interpellations. Or interpellations, I mean. Okay? So, that is Section 18. In section 19, another power of the president, except in cases of impeachment, all right, the president is otherwise provided the power or this constitution to grant reprieves, right, commutations and pardons, all right, reprieves, commutations and pardons. Guys, magkakaiba po yan. Okay, iba po yung reprieves, iba yung commutation, iba yung pardon. And also, he has a power to remit fines and forfeitures after convictions of final judgment. Pwede po siyang mag-grant ng tinatawag natin parole. Okay? Pwede po yan. Meron dito granant na parole. If I'm not mistaken, was it Estrada? I'm not sure, just double check it. Act of clemency. Yan. Ito yung standard. Hindi ko alam kung si GMA yung gumawa nito. Ano? Act of clemency. Okay? Pwede yan. Next, section 20. All right? Very important. The president may contract or guarantee foreign loans. Okay? Sinasabi niyo utang ng utang. Ano? Pwede po si Pangulo umutang on behalf of the Republic of the Philippines. So kung kailangan umutang, okay, kung kailangan umutang ni President, right, we have to know our capability or we have to know his or her capability in terms of economics. Diba? Hindi naman pwedeng magparautang sana. Right? it's not easy, ladies and gentlemen, to basically say that we have to just take loans, right? When we're making standards of a particular president, we have to know that he knows how to get strategic loans because he is getting loans, getting credit, all right, in behalf of the Republic of the Philippines. Also with the prior concurrence of the monetary board. Again, principle of checks and balances. Hindi pwedeng si president lang yung umutang. Dapat may presence ng monetary board and subject to such limitations as may be provided by the law. Okay? The monetary board shall within 30 days from the end of every quarter of the calendar year submit to the Congress a complete report of its decisions on applications for loans to be contracted or guaranteed by the government or government-owned and controlled corporations, which would have the effect of increasing the foreign debt or debt and containing other matters as may be provided by the law. The Monetary Board has the job to report to Congress. Okay? After 30 days, kailangan bibigay ni Monetary Board yung decision niya. Is this loan reasonable? Is it really needed? Will it affect or give? Kasi ayaw naman natin ng economic recession. Though on the side note, it's happening already. We do not want economic recession, right? So if we do not want economic recession, the Monetary Board should explicitly analyze the loans that we are going to get in different corporations. We have to put that one in our brain. Okay? Next, madali na lang to. Section 22, very important as well. The President shall submit to the Congress within 30 days from the opening of the regular session as the basis of the General Appropriations Bill, a budget of expenditure and sources of financing, including receipts from existing proposed revenues and measures. Kung pag-uusapan po natin itong kapangyarihan na to, this is what we call in student organization. Okay, this is what we call financial report. Okay? Ito yung kinakatakutan ng mga tao ngayon, primarily because there is one candidate who is running right now in the presidential position who will be imposing the first executive order as for the transparency. Nakalimutan ko yung term niya. Do you call this? Yeah. The goal is for transparency. It slipped on my mouth, right? But its goal is to show the transparency of every operations, every contract, it has to publicize the particular agreements from different offices and its expenditures. Yeah. So kailangan si President should provide a particular financial report. And imagine in 3 consecutive years, if I'm not mistaken, the office of the Vice President, which is the member of executive branch, was granted po of the Commission on Audit as the one or as an office that is or that has the most clean financial report, ladies and gentlemen, throughout their terms. Okay. Now, what are the qualifications? Review lang natin of a vice president or of a president and vice president. Especially for president, it's stated in section 2 or article 7 section 2 of the 1987 Constitution. 1, a natural born citizen. 2, registered voter. 3, able to read and write. 4, at least 40 years of age. 5, a resident of the Philippines for at least 10 years immediately preceding such sections. Now, let's talk about the executive cabinet members. The executive cabinet members' function is that the secretaries act as the alter ego of the president executing, with his authority, the power of the office of the president in the respective departments, The number of cabinet secretaries varies from time to time depending on the need of an administration. According to the Administrative Code of the Philippines of 1987, the President of the Philippines may create or dissolve any department as he sees fit. Pwede po silang gumawa ng department. Okay? So kung makikita nyo, wala namang IATF noong 2016. Wala namang IATF noong 2017. But because of the need, the necessity, and the urgency, there is an existence of IATF department already. It was created by the executive or by the president himself, which he has a power as well. He can create a cabinet member. Okay, so kung si Pacquiao gusto niyang magtayo ng Department of Boxing Ring, pwede. Okay, kung manalo siya. Right? So, yeah, joke lang naman yan. Sana hindi naman siya magtayo. Okay, next, powers of a cabinet secretary. As stated above, a cabinet secretary is the alter ego of the president. But most importantly, they possess the power to issue directives relative to their departments, such as department orders. These orders only apply to offices under a specific department, under the cabinet secretary's jurisdiction, and the cabinet secretaries also act as advisors of the president of the Philippines for their areas. It is important that all the members of cabinet secretaries are also specialized on their fields. Okay? Hindi pwedeng ilagay mo sa DepEd yung taong gaya ng nurse. Ganun. Okay? You should have a good background as well on that particular department, primarily because he or she is serving as an advisor of the president. Okay? So if there's an educational crisis, kailangan isang education specialist ang pwede nyong ilagay dun sa particular position. That's the same narrative that we have to follow in terms of public health crisis. When we have public health crisis, what you have to put are explicit or expert doctors. Doctors who are good in terms of fighting viruses, who have guns of syringe, guns of stethoscopes, guns of knowledge of how are they going to combat virus, and at least at the same time has an idea of virology. Hindi pwedeng retired colonel, hindi pwedeng retired lieutenant, hindi pwedeng retired general, ladies and gentlemen. Because again, advisors of the president for their areas. That's how crucial executive cabinet members are. Kaya hindi siya basta-basta, ay, tropa ko si ano, o sige, ilagay ko siya sa cabinet member. Okay? Hindi pwede po yung ginawa ni Ina Montisilio sa tanging ina mong lahat, na ilinagay niya yung lahat ng tropa niya, sa cabinet, di ba? May defense, di ba? So if you see that one, that's the most illogical cabinet members, though it's just a fiction. So summary, the cabinet offices, hindi ko na sila i-discuss lahat because we have 22. We have the Executive Secretary, Agrarian Reform, Agriculture, Budget and Management, Education, Energy, Environmental and Natural Resources, Finance, Foreign Affairs, Health, Justice, Labor and Employment, National Defense, Public Works and Highways, Science and Technology, Social Welfare and Development, Interior and Local Government Unit, Trade and Industry, Transportation and Communications, Tourism, Higher Education, and General or Director General of the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA. These are the cabinet secretaries who has a vital role in terms of the state's operation. So synthesis, I have 3 syntheses here. First one, the power of a president is wide, especially in state operation. Okay, so before we end this discussion, I want you to remember that the power of a president is wide, especially in state operations. Second one is the vice president is not a reserved tire of the president. Hence, the vice president has a specific role of power as well. And lastly, cabinet members are also responsible in state operations. If we're going to take a look at the executive member or the department or branch of the government is important and vital in giving or providing clear pathways of how the state would progress in the next 6 years of their terms. Okay, so those are the powers of executive cabinet or executive department. For your asynchronous activity, ladies and gentlemen, you will be answering the discussion board that I will be posting in Schoology. The deadline of the responses is on April 7, 2022, 5 p.m. Now, if you have any questions, clarifications, or violent reactions, please do notify me via Messenger, or you can chat it in the chat box. Or if you don't want, you can send me an email. Thank you very much for listening in this video. The resources of the video is basically the official, superficial Gazette of the Republic of the Philippines. You can check officialgazette.gov.ph for the copy of the 1987 Constitution. Thank you very much, guys, and have a great rest of the day. This is Sir Pat, and I hope that you guys have learned something today. Bye, guys.